I want to discuss today a little about CSS. For the remainder of the class, we're going to focus really heavily on CSS, and that stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And you really need to think of this more like the style of a web page, what makes it look good, what moves things around, and what just makes it a little bit more flexible and gives you a lot more options than you ever could inside of HTML. So I want everybody to kind of first think about CSS, or these cascading style sheets, as the design of everything, and HTML as just the data. So you're going to write in your words and things like that, but really you're going to style it with CSS. And I know that HTML has header 1 through 6 elements and different things that might make things a little bit larger or bold, stuff like that. But really the power of style comes into play with this CSS. So to kind of help wrap your minds around CSS a little bit, there's an old website. It's been around for many, many years. It's called CSS Zen Garden. And it's nothing really that special. It's just kind of a bunch of filler text, things like that. But if you pull up the source code right here, the source code is going to remain the same. All this HTML, I guess, is going to remain the same. And the cool thing about CSS Zen Garden is people will submit, you can see a list of different pages over here on the side, different CSS files applied to this HTML that we see here. So for example, this file right here uses the exact same HTML as this file. And this site here has the exact same HTML as the others, and so forth. And so what I'm trying to show here is that with some skills with CSS, you can apply a different style to the exact same words. You can see this road to enlightenment, so what's this about? And you can see that exact same HTML again on each of these pages. This road to enlightenment, so what's this all about? And move things around and apply things just a little bit differently than you otherwise would. So hopefully that makes sense a little bit to everybody. Let's pull that off to the side here. Really, CSS, some of its major reasons why we use it is we can take this one style sheet that applies style and apply it to all of our files on our page. Think, for example, if you were wanting to take Amazon and change the look and feel of Amazon.com. How much time would that take to go through manually and change every single page in the entire website? That would take forever, right? But with CSS, you could go through and just change one file, and the entire website would change. So some of the major reasons why we use this is we do have a lot more control over typography. With HTML so far, you guys have seen we can change size of text with like header elements, and we can put some space above and below, you know, with paragraphs or breaks and things like that. But we can do a lot more with margins and letter spacing and indentation and element positioning and font sizes and things that we could, you know, do with CSS that we just can't with HTML. We also have much more control over how pages are laid out. We talked a second ago about how the style is separate from the structure. Again, we use HTML to build out div tags filled with content, but we really use CSS to style those and move them around accordingly. We want to store these on a separate page, and again, that kind of helps us make changes globally rather than individually. And because of that, we don't have to put all that style on each individual page. So the documents are significantly smaller and much easier to maintain. So those are some of the reasons why we do CSS. But there's really 4 different ways of applying CSS, and we're going to cover them over the course of these lectures, video series. But the first is inline CSS. The second is embedded. The third is external, and the fourth is imported. And the way I want you to think about each of these, our first inline is going to be stored on each individual HTML element. It's really very specific. It's very detail oriented. Then after that, we'll talk about embedded, and this is something that applies rather than to each individual element. It's applied to an individual page. External looks something more like this, where you have one file that applies to multiple pages. So you have an external style sheet that you make. It's a .css file, and you will apply that file to multiple pages. So you can make changes in that one file and everything gets sent down. And then we'll talk briefly about imported, and this is a little bit more rare, but this is a way that we can reference external style sheets that are not on our domain name and make some changes there. So when we're discussing CSS, this is kind of the syntax that we use as we're writing CSS on our page. Okay, and these are known as rules, CSS rules. Okay, and these rules are made of selectors and declarations. And you can see here we're going to select something on the page. That might be selecting the body of the entire page. That also might be selecting a paragraph, or selecting a heading 1 or a heading 6 or something like that. And then you're going to have a declaration. The declaration is going to be made of a property and a value. And in this simple example, we can see how we want to change the color of the body to blue, right? So here's a little bit more in-depth example of applying multiple items or properties, or declarations, I should say, to different selectors. So on this example here, we would see how we would change all of the text color on the page to blue. And we would change the background color of the entire page to yellow. And then below we can see doing the same thing, but with hexadecimal. And again, we'll discuss that a little bit in further detail in a future video to help understand how that works.